Good day everyone. In my last video I leveled some pretty hefty criticism of Civ 7's map generation and general map variety. This map generation is completely garbage. Okay, not quite like that, but there was a lot of good feedback in the comments on this point. Ria7138 says, honestly, I think this is emblematic of the shift in philosophy of Civ 7. Almost every change between 6 and 7 was made at its core to make the game more linear. It all feels very linear compared to the more expressive and random 5 and 6. There's a lot of good points in there. I think Civ 7 is definitely more linear than previous entries right now, and I feel a lot of this does come down to the victory conditions being woefully inadequate. I hope this gets massively overhauled sooner rather than later. This comment I'm highlighting because Hawk9219 said they completely agree with all my points, which made me feel validated, but also because they bring up that the direction of Civ 7 is more about making the game balanced instead of fun, which is going to be a key theme throughout the rest of this video, so something to keep in mind. There's also a lot of criticism leveled at the devs in the comments, but I personally wouldn't be so quick to blame it on them. Rarely are the developers to blame for a lot of things you're probably mad at, because if the game wasn't rushed out before it was ready, the map generation, the UI, the linear legacy paths, chances are they'd all be vastly different. And that's not the fault of the devs. The fault no doubt lies at the leadership level of Firaxis and 2K, so cut the devs some slack. I'm sure they too had a lot of reservations about how the game shipped, but moving on to the main point of this video, what is going on with Civ 7's balance? I'll quickly touch on the map stuff again, as I think this really sets the scene well. Tile yields are normalized across all biomes, so there's no early game scramble for fertile lands and no high risk, high reward strategies like Tundra or Desert Civs. The closest we get is Catherine, who works well in Tundra, but nothing crazy like Civ 6 Canada or Mali. Now everyone can thrive in these environments, and you'll often find yourself starting in Desert or Tundra without any issues. I like what they tried to do with Tundra giving you culture and Desert giving you gold as their base tile yields, but it's such a small amount and such an isolated effect. It doesn't really make much of a difference, really. The reality is, perfectly balanced and equal starts does not equal fun. So much of the joy of Civ has come from adapting to imperfect and unfair conditions. And yes, a small part of the community would always re-roll for those perfect starts, but let them. If I want to try and overcome a desert peninsula start as Canada, let me have a crack. Whether it goes terribly or I do end up pulling out a win, it'll make for a memorable game either way. As it stands, map generation is so strict that no one is disadvantaged, relying only on the Civ leader memento combination for variety instead. I can't help but feel that the map isn't an element of the game you need to play around, which is leading to games feeling samey, as you can usually come up with a strategy or plan before the game starts, and it'll play out exactly as you want. The map rarely stands as an obstacle to what you're trying to achieve. It's just an, admittedly very pretty, backdrop that facilitates the game rather than adding to it. And no, it definitely doesn't help that the biomes on the map are all perfectly horizontal strips, so there isn't really a sense of exploration when exploring, as you can figure out where everything is way too quickly. So hear me out, instead of carefully fine-tuning stuff every patch, doing minor buffs here and there, tinkering around the edges of Civ and leader balance, we know that some Civs and leaders are absolutely horrendous right now. We all know this, right? So Firaxis, I'm officially giving you permission to just absolutely send it. No more updates that read, Egypt's river tiles next to a desert in the month of February now give 1.3 gold per turn per age instead of +1. I'm talking, every time Egypt settles on a navigable river, all cities gain a stacking 10% production bonus towards constructing wonders. You know what? Add an extra 0. Make it 100% so every city halves the production cost of wonders. Oh, but that would make Egypt way too strong. They'd be so good at building wonders. Yes, man, that's the point. Give Civs fun bonuses so they're all broken in their own way. Let Egypt be good for a patch or two and let people develop strategies for how to maximize their bonus, and then watch as counter-Egypt strategies develop to try and take advantage of their now super passive wonder building playstyle. Give the players crazy tools to play with and they'll make their own fun. And if it truly is too broken, then guess what? The game is in active development. You can just tone it down in a few weeks. But the strategy right now of going months without any major changes is just really not vibing with me. And I think they're relying too much on the inevitable expansion announcement to revitalize the community while these wet lettuce patches come out in the meantime. I'm reminded of a tweet from a few years ago where game devs would multiply a random number in their game's code by 1,000 and post the results, and so often the outcome was, damn, that looks like a ton of fun. So don't be afraid to go crazy and shake things up once in a while, Firaxis. Figuring out how new things work is great. That's why a game's launch is the most exciting time to be a part of the community. Everyone's experimenting, everyone's having fun. Right now, we get these huge patches that usually bring a lot of good quality of life changes for sure. They are nice, don't get me wrong, and they're going a long way to salvage the very questionable start that this game got off to. But picture me trying to convince my mates to come back and play again, and after nearly half a year of updates, almost all of the civs and leaders are completely unchanged. It's no wonder the game starts to look a bit tired. I hate to say it, I really do, but take some inspiration from League of Legends here. Every 2 weeks, Riot does these huge, sweeping balance changes, and they consistently shake up the meta with every update. Now, I'm not saying Civ needs to be that consistent or frequent with it, but with the current glacial pace of balancing, it needs some serious work. Here's me losing my mind from a stream the other day. There's no situation where you're ever going to plug this card in. I think it's so bad. They're clearly looking at Inca as well, right? But they've looked at Inca, they've given them balance updates to this exact Civic. But they left this tradition untouched? Come on, what are we doing out here? What is that? And just off the top of my head, here are some of the worst cards in the game that somehow still haven't been touched, but there's probably a fair few more that I missed, so let me know in the comments if you can find something worse, but I think that Incan tradition is a definite frontrunner. And my last point, and this may be controversial, but I want to leave you all with a hot take to discuss, is that having all civs be relevant and powerful in every era is odd right now. And I'm not sure I like it. You used to have very defined windows of opportunity where your civ would excel. So for example, in Civ 5, you had the Huns with their battering ram rush, which was absolutely god tier in the early game. But after that, they kind of fell off. So you had to really use that early game window to get yourself ahead and coast on that advantage for the rest of the game. A similar thing with Gilgamesh and Civ 6 with war carts. Civ 7, however, doesn't really have that, because everyone's abilities are always relevant to the era you're in, which in theory sounds good, and to be honest, I'm not going to criticize this change too heavily, but I do wish those windows of opportunity still existed across the eras. The Maya would actually be a good use case for this, I think, because you could, for example, make them really weak in antiquity in exchange for that super powerful unique quarter that scales amazingly into the late game. This way you still get the agency of playing around with your civ's unique buildings and units every era as you do right now. But with that little added dynamic that everyone on the map knows that they have to try and shut down Maya before they scale out of control, which would paint a bit of a target on that player's back. To stick with my earlier analogy, it's like picking Nasus and getting bullied the whole game, slowly stacking up until you eventually get out of control and can take revenge on everyone who bullied you in the early game. A bit of risk and reward. But I don't know, let me know your thoughts on this. I kind of just got carried away while writing the script here and thought I'd chuck it in. But anyway, that's all I've got for you today. As I said, let me know what you think about the balancing strategy of Civ 7 so far. And if you really want to get into my thoughts on individual civs and leader balance, I've released tier lists for the latest patch, so go check them out. But regardless, don't forget to like or dislike this video, and yeah, thank you so much for watching.